notions and challenges as ordinary people. In contrast, the sacred depiction elevates them to a higher plane, emphasizing their divine origins, miraculous deeds, and unconventional struggles. So again, Jeppe poised props, St. David's up. The time now is 2:57. The debate will start in here at 3:57. The motion is, this House believes that religious narratives should prioritize the mundane depiction of spiritual figures over their sacred ones. This House believes that religious narratives should prioritize the mundane depiction of spiritual figures over their sacred ones. Good luck.
And their religious leaders, and religious figures. Now, for some context in this debate, we need to understand that people are starting to become more skeptical and questioning religion as a whole more. People tend to be less spiritual. People tend to be less spiritual, believe in the idea of magic or etc. Now, this is due to the growing security and safety within the world, education, critical thinking. People don't find a need for. People don't believe in a need for religion. They believe in their own personal safety, comfort of the government, etc. And we're able to understand how the system has been for a long time, in which oftentimes these religious figures were depicted as these spiritual religious figures, the ones that were powerful, they were still more like your Jesus, your Moses, these. The old system generally tended to emphasize these people as a means, generally tended to emphasize them to show the magic, strength, power, etc. in these religious deities and these ideologies. Oftentimes it would use powers or etc. to convince people that if they place their trust or respect in something like God or etc., that they will return us. Now we advocate for a near system in which we speak about or display the more average people within more average figures within religious texts, etc. Because we believe it more fairly encapsulates these people and will allow them to connect better. I'll go on to this more. We want humanity as our primary principle. Now we need to understand how religious leaders. We need to understand how religious leaders or the goals of religions in general tend to be. Firstly, we want good, dedicated followers. We want representation of people who are religious texts, good representation of people who are religious texts. We want the message of religion or etc. to be spread. And second, fourthly, we want our followers to be happy. We want the people that engage with our religion to be happy and feel security within the religion. Why it's primarily important, why this is very important, is firstly, once again, the goal of religion is always going to be that people accurately learn about and act what their religion desires, what their religion's deities desires, that helps the world, etc. So on our side, yes. And we need to characterize what average people that believe in religion or act or engage with this is. Firstly, we tell you that this is a spectrum between more dedicated followers and your more passive followers. More passive followers tend to just be your average people that are born into religion. These tend to be the people that are born into religion. The way they engage with this tends to be these people want comfort, security within their faith. They want comfort and security within their faith. The way they engage with religion is very important. Firstly, these are the kinds of people that go to church on Sundays just because it's a normal thing to do. Maybe they don't go to church every day. It's because maybe they don't go to church every day. They know the basics, etc. And we tell you that these people tend to be passively engaging with faith, that they don't necessarily spread their faith, they don't necessarily actively seek to learn about their faith. They do what's required, and that's it. On the other end of the spectrum, we see that there are these dedicated followers, is that people who deeply believe in these religions, even people who are convinced, they want good faith representation, want good representation of their faith, they oftentimes spread their faith, even if it's just in a normal way. Maybe you talk about TikTok or something. They often tend to want to convert people and spread messages, like the way they engage with these religions, that they're more dedicated, they go to church, etc. more often, they spread their religion, they spread their religion more accurately. And also what we tell you is that on our side, we hope to improve the quality of our followers, as which they're not necessarily passive, or they're not necessarily passive, but they're more dedicated, have more buy-in, and are more actively just the amount of people in general are more actively interested. Before I continue,
why should we depict their religious leaders as would be finding to encouraging popes to be people, or encouraging people to look up to others who follow religion very closely? Why must figures like Jesus?
Because these are the kind of figures that people are able to connect. Listen, at the end of the day, religious leaders are figures of the roots of why people engage with religion. And the roots of why people engage with religion are abstract or powerful or disconnected from the average person. It will be hard for them to engage or believe or be in touch with their religious leaders, like their folks or people themselves as their religion. Now on to my first point, which is about connection or buy-in within people within religion. Firstly, we tell you once again, there's an issue in society. There's a disconnect between your average followers' self-worth and capabilities and the power they have within their religion. This is like people just waiting for Jesus to fix the world, or maybe they don't necessarily go out of their way to try to fix the world. They don't know the way to fix their lives. They pray well enough that they believe our little religion for them. Second panel, we tell you, these kind of people don't tend to do much for their churches or much for their religion. And on our side, how do we solve this? Firstly, panel, we provide these people with attainable goals. When we showcase your average people, this is like when Jesus was this is the kind of stuff, like when Jesus used to wash his servants' feet, or just was a kind man, not necessarily when he resurrected from the dead. Maybe it's the story of Job staying faithful during even the worst times in his life. And why is this important? Is that we show people that they have the power not only to change their lives, but also to change the lives of others, to influence their religion in ways that they wouldn't necessarily be shown to be able to do from other people. And we show people, in this way, people tend to be more willing to try to do things for their churches, for their religions. We secondly tell you that people tend to engage more in their issues, and to engage more on their impacts that they're able to do. Secondly, we tell you that these people are realistic role models. For example, let's say your mother or police officers that help your community. And we tell you that these are realistic, legitimate examples and personal inspirations that people can look forward to and try.
Every human society, past and present, has strived to create the concept of some kind of divinity. The Greeks created their gods. Abrahamic religions were created with all-powerful beings that had influence over things like time and space. And you and your God were created pharaohs because something needed to happen that was more powerful than concrete systems, that you could rely on for a source of magic, that you could look up to in times of stress. Crucially, this is a debate about religious groups and how they all speak about their divine power. I want to frame out their opt-in, opt-out case, which is contradictory, and the fact that it is probably true that religions already have different incentives to encourage people to opt into their religions. So, you can have popes who, like the current pope, is encouraging people to be able to practice mass in their own languages or have religion that is more relatable. Or there are leaders in other spaces that people can look to for moral guides, such as Barack Obama, if you want to be a good leader in that kind of thing. Finally, though, I want to flip their claim on the fact that people have greater connections to figures like Jesus, and therefore it is more positive to have these individuals as role models. No, people can create more substantive connections with individuals like their ancestors who they saw live and have more human-related, some human-related aspects to them. Or they can just create connections to people who they are around you, like their dad, if they follow religion well. So it is probably true that people are better able to create relatable connections with followers of religion than gods. So it is important that gods exist as a unique avenue for people to explore different kinds of connections. So, how should religions depict divinity generally? Crucially, divinity is the unique thing that religion offers to separate itself from just being a standard moral system. It allows people to opt into ideas of things like the afterlife or ability to exist like in different levels of morality or gain some kind of benefit from a miracle. This means that religion is unique only on our side in its ability to separate itself from things like laws. We think that this control of narratives will probably happen in places like churches or generally with preachers, and exists to counteract the trend that they describe of people believing less in religion and underemphasizing gods. Because there's already sufficient narratives of people being grounded by religion, like atheists critiquing the idea of Jesus being anything more than a regular individual. So there's sufficient capacity for people to engage with some kind of individual that they want to relate to if they're desperate for that to exist as a narrative. So what interpretive depiction do we provide? We think that we would still have answers like individuals who are able to be somewhat fallible. We would just change the scale of their trials and tribulations. It's not a chocolate cookie tempting you, it's the devil kind of thing. This means that people can probably still see a lot of similar things in terms of having guides of their morality and that kind of thing, as opposed to when individuals are depicted as mundane, and therefore religion loses its magic on their side. Final point is that, what do we not defend and what are we willing to trade off? We don't defend the removal of human characteristics. We can still have some of that. But crucially, this debate might not be a dichotomy, but they're more likely to remove more religious characteristics from individuals. Because if you see creatures undermining the power of God, naturally you would be biased towards undermining the power of God yourself, so we'd probably get a very minimal impact on that. So we'd be willing to trade off the fact that there is some specificity to humanity they have. Because A, it probably means that you do undermine the power of God, and B, it's just broadly unrelatable. Like you can't relate to a saint who has lived a few hundred years ago and has experienced very different trials to you. So, 3 arguments from opposition. Firstly, the fact that like divinity is the functional basis of religion, and they undermine that. Secondly, on how that for interaction with religion, which deals with a lot of the practical questions is going to speak to you about perception. Crucially, I just want to note where their case is now, because at this point, it is very clear that individuals probably buy more to other areas of like being a good person or guides on how to be a good human. So they would probably, and like role models, so they would instead be able to look to God as an evangelical guide. So the second, this argument on the functional basis of divinity highlights why even if people don't like get value from looking to God, the basis of religion for the large amount of people who do buy into religion who are likely to be massively more affected by this notion of benefiting more on our side. Further, people just are unlikely to be complacent in this argument, which I will highlight. A, because there's real world consequences to just waiting for Jesus to do things, like you will starve if you just wait to be fed. And secondly, there's sufficient reason to strive if you have a more powerful God. In fact, we argue that people probably strive more when the sky is the limit and like people can see, sure, some things that are attainable, like washing people's feet, but also some like miraculous things like, oh, if Jesus survived being tempted by the devil, I can like hold off on the chocolate for a while. So this is important because it affects a massive amount of people. And the basis of religion is an existence as a divine set of powers that has consistent influence over like different events. Why do they deconstruct the divinity of religion and make like it less powerful for the people who can describe religion? A, power is underemphasized by preachers. But B, it shows that counterclaims against religion are less likely to be refuted because religion is primarily focusing on relating itself to being more human. So religion self-concedes that it may not be powerful or the things that it might be preaching may not be true, so it falls victim to the trend away from religion. And people who really buy into a religion and find value in that moral guide are probably going to be left lost, whereas on the comparative we create clear guidance for those individuals. So we protect the power of religion and give people the guide. Secondly, they limit the idea of consistent influence, and this is perhaps most important for the poor people that they prioritize, because these are individuals who need assurance that there will be something to help them if they put in proportional effort, so we limit complacency. A, because there's no attempt to continuously show the presence of magic or divinity. You don't canonize new saints and that kind of thing. But B, you undermine divinity when it does happen. So people who do believe in divinity, even if the first reason isn't true, lose the ability, lose the faith in the fact that the divinity is very important. So we generate more buy-in on our side. This is important because we probably create more long-term benefits and we create a higher scale of benefits to people who are most invested in religion. Finally, divinity is the most powerful religion tool that religion has to improve its function. And this deals with the crux of their case on things like lying. No, we get led by A, fantastical people are more exciting to relate to and more shocking, so people are likely to be attracted to this. But B, this is unique as a type of lying, different to like philosophy or other moral systems, so people are likely to join religion, follow moral systems, and therefore be able to get the kind of comfort that religion offers. Comparatively, they're broadly unexciting. Secondly, we get a high level of comfort because people are part of something bigger than themselves. They can see the black rock in Mecca and feel like they're part of something very big, and they can feel as though their ancestors are holding them in the palm of their hand and protecting them. So we give people more solace in religion on our side. Finally, we increase the mandate of religious structures to act because they're seen as having more power and hence more capacity, so we get things like encouraging churches to reach out. At the end of my speech, religion differs from something like law or philosophy because it shows that there is divine power that people can look to in times of stress. They crush that quite literally, God is dead on the job.
I think psychoposition loses the debate when they recognize that people become this grow as my first piece here. They don't want to follow religion. They only do it because they're persuaded to, because of this kind of powerful deity. Note, we value the fact that people want to follow that religion. Because that kind of buy-in that psychoposition gets, it's the buy-in that because you're being watched, that's why you do something, not because something is good. What in effect psychoposition is arguing for is this kind of surveillance power that only holds you accountable because of the fear of punishment. Note that this means that we are intrinsically different from him. Because the reason why he wants to follow this moral structure is because that God figure, that spiritual figure, is your mentor. Because you believe it will be beneficial for you, not because you think you'll be punished for it, because of this kind of special ability. We think that now going on to some rebuttal, with number one, they try to frame us out of this debate by saying that there are other means of getting human relatedness. You can look at individuals, you can look at ancestors. But then we ask the question, why should divinity be different towards these kind of individuals? We think that this will be much more impactful if you are able to relate towards these spiritual figures, because they're the most impactful within religion. Everyone within religion shares that kind of common spiritual figure. We think that we can also take the benefits of having that relatedness and applying it to a much more wider audience, because the reality is we don't have that kind of, not everyone has that kind of priest that they find relatable to. We think that we're more able to help more people in the long term. Secondly, is this idea that you can harm the power of God. First of all, we don't know why this is valuable towards this debate, because why should power be inherently important towards religion? We think that the only reason why this might be important is this idea of buy-in. But note panel that this kind of buy-in towards protection is on the basis of fear. The only reason why you're following this kind of God is because you're afraid of them. If you didn't have that fear, you would not believe in you would not believe on them. On the secondary level, which is why we believe we're much better in this debate and why this actually harms this side. If you remove the power of God, and people are able to willfully choose into it, we think that the kind of engagement that you get in religion is going to be far more beneficial, because it doesn't matter whether or not your God exists through some kind of empiricism. It matters how it affects you spiritually. Thirdly, is this idea that people won't be complacent in the being and hold off. This is kind of like a preemptive thing about people being dependent onto God. We think that this is very harmful towards their case, because at the point at which people will only not be complacent to the point at which they starve and actively harm themselves, we think that is a fundamental problem. Because you've taken them towards the extremes where they don't need to deal with them in the first place. If you tell people that your God has some kind of special abilities and can fix your problems for you, they won't try and fix their problems themselves until those problems become too difficult to handle. Then lastly, this idea of divinity and buy-in, this idea that you can get some kind of shocking things, and you can use divinity as a power for the religion in order to get buy-in, for example, punishing complacent members. We think that, as I've said before, this is harmful because the only kind of buy-in you get there is if you're actively being held accountable for it, if you're actively being watched. And then secondly, on this idea of being something bigger than yourselves. We think that still exists on our side, and we think that on another level we're much better than them, because the people who are there actively want to be there because they believe in these mental spiritual role models, rather than this kind of punisher and overseer. Okay, I'll be going on to my substantive matter and how this is more abusive and manipulative towards followers. I think we can identify two problems that currently exist. Number one is that people would not normally adopt religion without fear, and secondly is that people with religious power, for example, like the Pope or priests, abuse their power for personal gain. We think that sacred scriptures cause these two problems in two ways. Number one is through the hierarchy that this sacred scripture creates between divinity and between follower. We think that the sacred scripture actively puts the divinity above the follower and puts the divinity as an overseer and protector as well as a punisher. We think that this kind of hierarchy is created because of the fear of their grand ability, the ability to send you to hell, or the ability to cure you of any illness. We think that this is done two ways. Number one is the ability to torture and punish you, even in abstract means, for example, hell. And secondly is the ability to surveil you, to be constantly watching you. As you can see, that these are omnipotent gods. So why does this work towards making people adopt a religion, even with fear, and might cause abuse? We think that this is analogous towards like a 1984 situation, where you're going to be constantly surveilled in that fear of punishment. We think that what this means is two things. Number one, the people who follow these religions will lose their autonomy and will lose their ability to do things that are beneficial towards it. And secondly, it makes it an active dependence onto that God, because God will help you by intervening within aspects of life, which, for example, like illness or like some kind of scarcity, which means that you fail to neglect on working on them for yourself, because these gods can do these great deeds. We think that this amounts to some kind of infantilization, where you just treat the people who follow these religions like a child, harming their dignity and their autonomy. How are we better on our side? We think that it's because we're able to change this hierarchy system in making them more equal, by making them a follower and divinity as a more of a mentor figure. We think that we can do this through relatedness. Three things. Number one is because this divinity can be imperfect, they don't have to come from divine origins. Secondly is that they have common challenges and troubles with people. And then thirdly, they don't have special powers, this kind of magic that can turn water into wine. If you care about not abusing the actual followers of your religion and doing what's best for the people in religion, silence.
The House thanks the proposition second and now welcomes the opposition second here. Yeah?
At the end of the second proposition speech, I'm still unsure as to whether they like religion or they don't like religion. So what they tell us is that they want people to buy into religion. But then they also tell us in section that religion is this extremely coercive thing that makes people do what they don't want to do. That people are trapped inside of religion and want to opt out. So we make it more realistic. It is something that we're going to do. Notice what this does then. Because when P2 shifts the case into being something where they don't necessarily value religion as much as they tell us in P1, it undermines all the benefits that we're able to extract from their case in P1 in the first place. Because they tell us things like people are able to buy in, and when more people buy into religion, they're able to do things like, give charity, give back to the religion. And secondly, they tell us that people are so strong within religion that they're going to be better, like this is going to be better for religion, everything like that. But then in P2, we get this counter-narrative that religion is way too coercive and doing really bad things for individuals. Therefore, we should make it more realistic so people know what they're opting into. Notice how, one, they've just proven that they want more people to opt out of religion, so like the quality of individuals inside of religion is going to be better, which undermines their first effort. But even further than that, that is just incorrect in the first place. Because religion is the only place where you can believe in fantasy things, like people turning water to wine. We have so many other options within society, like even opting into the moral narratives given by the government, given by the law, that religion is a unique place where you can opt into it to engage with your own spirituality, to do things like escape resting in hell for the rest of the afterlife after you die. Religion is unique because it gives people an ability to experience like that. But then further than that, people just aren't relatable because like the second thing that they're hanging a case on is that these spiritual figures aren't relatable. Brendan has already told you before his speech even came out that these figures like that we're not doing normal individuals like the Pope, because those people aren't firstly created by these religious narratives, aren't created about them by things like, I don't know, David and Goliath being created about them. But then secondly, these individuals existed in like 2,000 years ago. What this means is then that these stories being created about them are unlikely going to be real on either side of the debate, because we are still unsure as to what happened in the first place. At the point that we make the stories more realistic or being able to happen, it's just easier to find ways to disprove them by using historical concrete fact that we have found. On our side, people, even in our worst case, they don't believe in these stories, they are able to opt into the moral codes and narratives pushed by the religion behind these stories, therefore they are able to act better within religion in the first place, being further than that anyways. Two clashes in, for an argument later, how it's a more legitimate form of escapism. Firstly then, on principle, because we don't get much of it. Brendan tells you, and it's extremely important what he tells you, because they're going against and we're closer to the core of what religion stands for. It tells you, one, that power is underemphasized by these preachers. Secondly, that encounters through religion are enhanced. This is important, because what it tells you is that we, on our side, we are more core to what the people actually believe in. People believe in these stories that people are able to have the moral codes to act behind those moral codes. But religion is able to act as a stronger beacon to prepare these people to opt into them in the first place. So the amount of skill that we're able to get on the way up is way high. What they tell you is that we can't abuse this power for things like coercion. Firstly, I've already told you earlier about how these aren't going to be the figures like the Pope abusing their power. But secondly, when we make them more realistic, it looks like the religious figures right now, like the Pope, is similar to the spiritual figures in the first place. Meaning that it's way easier to muddy the waters and claim that because the Pope has the same amount of powers as Jesus, therefore he has that power and he has the same ability to access that power. On our side, we're able to create that separation between spiritual figures that we create our morals around and people just in charge of the religion, so we're less able to do things like coerce them and use it in the first place. So on likelihood then, even if people aren't necessarily going to buy into these stories, we're way more likely to enforce the morals and behind and all the values that we get from being able to come into religion in the first place. But secondly, we are way more likely to guarantee that this power abuse isn't going to happen in the first place. This is much more urgent on our side, because on our side we're able to keep the core of religion, people and the members inside of it are able to actually be valued and be close to the core principles of religion. Secondly, on the chat about buying, they tell you, firstly, that people don't do enough, and I was extremely passive within religion, I need to opt into buying more. But secondly, they tell you that they believe so strongly that people are going to believe so strongly within religion that people need to opt out and stop believing within religion. Notice how these two premises contradict each of them within themselves. Because the one tells you they're so strong, the other tells you they're so weak. Therefore, the benefits that they extract, like things like charity, aren't able to happen. Thirdly then, the types of connections and relatability I've already told you are wrong. But then fourthly, they tell you that this is about something bigger than themselves. A few responses then. I've already told you about contradicting thingies. Secondly, what they admit to you is that in P2 they tell you that people are going to buy into these religions before. Because on both sides, people are going to buy into religion for wanting to not exist in the whole for the rest of their afterlife, and something extremely abstract from them. Because the basis of religion, and it's unique to everything else, is because there's some sort of divine power. Unless on their side they're saying even God isn't something that is divine, and us be able to prove to you that we're able to be so divine and we have this power to buy into to reinforce those morals in the first place. Meaning that when we make religion more accessible and being able to believe into these stories, we're actually able to enforce that buy-in. 3 more points about buy-in in my substantive that I'm going to give you now, but before that,
Are autocracies that rule through fear valuable?
No, but religion is specifically different from autocracy because they have no binding power over an individual. But good luck trying to prove that, or at least appear in the speech. Anyways, next in argument then, how religion acts as a better form of escapism. To understand this, you have to first understand that the types of individuals that opt into religion are people that are trying to escape their current situation most of the time. People impoverished individuals trying to escape their situation, trying to guarantee a better life for them after they die. Or after having a traumatic experience, trying to opt into religion to calm their and have new morals after being an extremely bad person from the past. But better for escapism for 2 reasons then. Firstly, we separate history from religion. Because a lot of the times, and the reason that people opt out of religion is because it can be easily disproven. When you see that Jews ran across the desert and there's no desert in that area, that can be easily disproven using historical knowledge that this is extremely concrete. When we link religion and we make these spiritual figures more ordinary, we're able to use history to link those spirits together to make it so easily disproven. But on our side, when these stories are spiritual and you know and kind of know that they already are disproven and you want to believe that, you're able to look at the morals behind it. Therefore, people can obtain this type of escapism from their current situation because they know that they are different. Secondly, you're unable to relate to these people. This is good, because when people are in bad situations obtaining to religion, they see spiritual figures who got glorified and being spoken about 2,000 years later. Those people, you and yourself cannot relate to those individuals being glorified like that. Therefore, you yourself, by having the same abilities as that individual, are unable to actually access this type of escapism because you're in a extremely bad situation. You feel like a horrible person when you're in your own religion. When you see that these figures can become glorified 2,000 years later, these amazing individuals way after you, when they have the same abilities as you. On our side, they are these spiritual figures, they have miraculous abilities, it stays that way, you're able to value their morals.
I find it ironic how they stand up here and say that we do not value autocracies, but we do not necessarily think that religions are the same as them because they don't have the same binding power over the people. Note that throughout their speech, they talk about how religion is so valuable and has so much buy-in on their side. They're directly telling you that because of the fear of this God, that people buy into their system. And we tell you that it's analogous to an autocracy. We tell you that we value people actually questioning religions because it's the reasons why we don't have witches burning at the stake. It's the reason why we don't have gay people being murdered in today's world. We tell you that that questioning is something that is valuable and they can't deny that this is analogous to their side. Now, they talk about this idea of people being able to use religion to escape their situation. We tell you that we can achieve the exact same kind of benefit through the escape of community. We tell you that the sense of belonging that you gain from religion is actually more from the community and interacting with different people, being able to relate to people, not necessarily that just because you're trying to relate to these religious leaders. No, thank you. And we tell you that preaching God's plan is not something that can only be preached on your side. We can still preach that same value without these glorifying of these leaders. We tell you that you can't relate to these figures. We tell you that sympathy, when you're going through a hard time and being able to have somebody understand you, or even just speak to you, is something that is inherently a lot more valuable, more likely to get actual valuable outcomes than simply preaching to a fake deity. Now, what are some other problems that we get on this side? They try and address and say that we won't be glorifying people like the Pope. Note that in their first speech, how they mentioned that even the people encourage the churches to act good because they're seen as more powerful. We tell you that if society has a perception that you are more powerful, it means that you have more power. We tell you that by having these deities that are seen as closer than God, it gives you a mechanism and a way that says that I can be like that as well. Why won't the Pope be closer to God than I am? We tell you that it is already a perceived perception in society. And we've seen what happens when we give the church power, something that they say is valuable. We've seen colonialism, pedophilia of children. We've seen gay homicide. It is not a valuable thing. Note, and just in some clarity on our side, we're talking about existing believers in their side. We're not talking about on our side. We tell you that on their side, the existing believers are the ones who are going to fall victim to these people. We still think that people are going to be questioning a lot, as they have through modern day society. We tell you that a lot of people are not being Catholic. We tell you that the amount of Catholic preachers that they are, and believers that they are today, is substantially less than they were in the 1930s, simply because people are able to question more. That engagement has been valuable and allows for the better of core values that we have in society. So what are the two main clashes that we have in today's day? First is a sense of belonging, and second of all is the amount of follow Bible. And it's not just the amount of follow Bible, but also the type of the value of that kind of Bible. Note that we are keeping the same type of morals of religion. They talk about how we value religion, and they straw man our case to say that we don't want religion. No, we want religion, but we think that where religion becomes valuable is a type of community engagement, and that involves questioning. It doesn't mean ruling by an almighty power, an autocracy, if you will, saying that this is the only way, one and only way. Something that they want. No, thank you. Now they talk about why it's invaluable to counterclaim, counting claims, and how on their side people are less likely to counter claims. And we tell you that discussion with the church is something good. Why we don't have witches burning, etc. We want people to opt into religion, but we still want people to we don't want people to be coerced into this. We want people to actually question and choose to buy into religion and not necessarily join it out of fear. Before I continue, I'll take a while.
Would you ban religions from speaking about God?
We don't ban religions from speaking about God. I don't know where you get this idea that we don't value religion in of itself. We tell you that we can still integrate core ideas of Christianity into, not just Christianity, of religions overall, into the type of preaching. We tell you that not all questions can be answered, and that is where we can bring in these ideas of God, such as how is the universe created, such as how is consciousness a thing, how and what comes after that. We tell you lastly, you can use fiction to escape. They talk about how people use religion as escape. We tell you that religion isn't unique. This is the difference is that people believe it is real. And we tell you that the downside of that is that you tend to get a lot more harmful kind of line, like with the priests, like with the different engagements, or even just with other religions. Now, onto the sense of belonging. Why are we first of all better for a sense of belonging? This is because we get two things. Firstly, we get a non-mutually exclusive benefit. We tell you, we tell you that we get a sense of community by allowing more people to be able to believe this religion on our side. By having it seen as more palatable, more relatable, you're more likely to get actual buy-in instead of people just simply saying that they are Christian and going out and doing whatever they want, not going to church. We tell you that we get people to actually engage with the church because they find it something as valuable. We tell you that the reason why we don't have much buy-in today is because people don't find it believable from this glorification, from these stories. And so overall, because we're able to get the community benefit that is mutually exclusive, they concede to this. We still get their benefit of the types of sense of belonging that you get from engagement with God. Because again, like we said, you can still preach some values. It's a debate about prioritizing, about which one should we value more, and we still think that we should value this kind of engagement. Note that we don't value the straw man that we don't value the straw man. That we want buy-in, and we don't want to be we don't want the abusive hierarchies that Scripture creates. They're completely straw man in our case. They're not engaging with us. They're simply just taking our analysis of their case and using it to say that this is a contradiction on your side. It's not hard. It's not in terms of follower buy-in. We see that we are more likely to get a sense of buy-in simply because it's something that is more palatable. We are more likely to engage with it. And we think that this can just simply be seen by daily trends in society. There's a reason why Catholicism has become a lot less unpopular, and people have begun believing more in the faith of religions and not necessarily the religion itself. And we think that because we're able to be more palatable, allow people to actually have a valuable, relatable engagement, we think that not only are they more likely to believe in the church, but they're more likely to actually go there, to actually gain that sense of belonging of the community, and not necessarily have this fake kind of idea that, oh, you can shoot for the stars because Moses parted the Red Sea. Thank you.
Panel, let's make one thing very explicitly clear. Neither side here should be defending the existence or the not existence of a God. Both sides should parallel believe that there is going to be a God, right? The difference then in this debate, or what it should have been, is on our side we should argue, or we should portray a narrative in which God actually affects the world and has some level of power, right? And so Jesus can walk on water, Moses can part the Red Sea, the black rock can appear in Mecca, right? On side opposition, what they should have argued is that that God does not affect the real world. God does not have this level of power, and God is just some sort of being that exists. Therefore, what we need to understand is all these issues that they tell us about the problems with religion, the fear of persecution, all that sort of stuff, they have those too. They do not get rid of that by arguing that God is less powerful, because God ultimately still exists. But let's also deal with this straw man that they tell us that people only believe in God because of the fear of punishment. Firstly, most people who are religious believers don't follow this Pascal's wager idea of, oh, I can believe in religion because then I can go to heaven, and if I don't, and God does exist, then I'll go to hell. Most religious believers believe in a God for a number of reasons. Firstly, a sense of community. We achieve that better. Secondly, because they have a reason to live. They have a reason to exist, to live a good life, right? And thirdly, we think they have some level of ethics or whatever that leads them to live in a good society that they want to exist in. We think ultimately we achieve these better, and we achieve people better being able to relate with religion on our side. So in my speech I'll be doing three touches. Firstly, a relationship with religion and how we are better for that. Secondly, I'll talk about the importance of religion. And thirdly, I'll talk about buy-in, buy-out, this relatability argument that they bring us. First is that our relationship with religion. The first thing that we need to say is that you aren't meant to relate to Jesus or to God or to Muhammad, right? You are meant to follow them by virtue of them being good things, and they are going to guide you, right? And so this idea that they present us like a mentorship, sure, we think that's true, but we think we achieve that better, right? They are meant to be powerful, they are meant to be protecting, they are meant to be loving, right? We think we best achieve this idea of an all-knowing, omnipotent, all-loving God when we actually tell people of demonstrations of that power, right? We think at the point that we tell people that Jesus was able to walk over the Red Sea, we make Jesus a sacred figure. By making him a sacred figure, we make him important, we make him much more likely to be followed, because people buy into religion when they think that it's going to help them, right? Second one, like a relationship with religion idea, we think that we best have, like a relationship with community and stuff, right? We think that ultimately, when you have a community that is strongly together because of your belief in a religious leader that is powerful, we think that's better. We think about the side opposition. They tell us a few things about how they have better communities because there's not this level of coercion and stuff that exists, and how they don't have coercion. We think that ultimately, on our side, when we allow people to believe in a higher power that is necessarily strong and that is necessarily something bigger than they are, right? It's not like this regular, banal, everyday struggle that Jesus is going through. He's being tempted by the devil. It gives them comfort. It makes them feel more validated in their religious beliefs because they know that God is powerful and can protect them. We think that ultimately that's why people follow a religion. It is for protection. It is for a sense of identity. It is for a sense of purpose. When that purpose exists because your God is actually doing things, we think that's better. We don't think that we should have this mentor, as they try to tell us, because ultimately why then are you following a religion at all? Why not just follow the laws, right? We think that by making this idea of relatability and making this idea of you should have ordinary people, we devalue the importance of religion. That then goes on to my second point about why we think religion is important. I spoke about this earlier. We think that religion gives people a sense of identity and a sense of purpose. When we have this God that is ultimately fighting the devil, and is doing things like you believe in Buddhism and you're trying to achieve nirvana and stuff like that, we think that idea of trying to get that gives you a reason to live good, but also gives you a reason to live at all. On side opposite of our proposition, when they tell us these ideas of we should just have a mentor, God should be less powerful, we shouldn't have this idea of coercion or whatever, we think that it devalues this importance of religion and means that why have religion at all? We try to ask this in a POI, and they tell us that oh no guys, we're not trying to get rid of God, we're trying to have him as a answer to unanswerable questions. We don't think that ultimately people are going to choose to follow him then, because why do it when you can just follow the laws and not sacrifice the things that you usually have to do to follow a religion, right? And then secondly on this idea of the importance of religion, we think that people are going to fear punishment anyways, right? If you follow a religion, you are going to fear punishment whether or not Jesus walked through the ocean on the water, right? We think ultimately in a religious sense and in just a normal sense, you're going to fear being arrested if you do something immoral, and so you're not going to do that. And so this idea of fear of punishment just doesn't happen. Ultimately then let's move on to this last idea of bias. A few things here. Firstly, we think that we're better for buy-in because we have higher checks on the way to coercion, right? On their side or on our side. We separate church and history. We make the church something that is necessarily just about divinity, just about a reason to live and stuff like that. And so people are more incentivized to follow it because they know that even if something is proven false, like Moses not existing, they can still follow their religion because it gives them other alternatives, gives them good things. When we make Moses as a normal person and then he's disproven, we think that people are likely to buy it out, in fact. Secondly, we think that there are also just religions that don't have punishment systems, and we think, as I said earlier, that punishment systems exist in general, and so people are going to buy in or buy out of religion either way. And then thirdly, on this idea of buying, we think that ultimately, if you are buying into religion for fear of punishment, we just don't think that happens that often, right? We think that most people follow a religion for other purposes, for meaning, for happiness, for community. We think that's going to happen better on our side when we actually provide them a reason for meaning.
Whereas on their side, they just have this religion that exists, but it's basically just the laws, right? So then, ultimately, unlike a weighing thing, we see that we are blessed, like we're more likely going to have people buy into religion. We're going to have more people buy into religion because the religion that they are buying into is perceived as stronger, as more important. And thirdly, we think that like at the point that they are arguing that people are buying out, we should focus on it. They dilute that because they limit divinity and purpose to a church community where you share a moral system. We have that in basic society, where people exist under the same law, but people still look for more. Three things that they've done strategically that are cases. First, especially in second and third, a lot of their case becomes based on the fact that buying into religion is coercive and it's generally damaging. They still have to push divinity on their side to some extent, because it is a prioritized notion. However, they probably push it less, so it is less the focus of religion, so it has less checks on it, so it's likely to be done more so maliciously, i.e. Mormonism pushes divinity in roughly the same extent that they would posit in their case, and that's terribly regulated. Secondly, in terms of case using engagement, is that they premise a lot of their case on making individuals more human. But it's unclear why they need to be such a high degree of human, i.e. have humanness prioritized over divinity. We're fine representing Jesus as a human, but also having him primarily have divine powers. He still washed people's feet and gave them a sufficient moral power. Why must people be primarily human on their side as opposed to primarily divine? Especially in the face of trends that they posit about atheists criticizing these individuals and making them more human already, we think prioritizing divinity is just the most logical. Finally, as for the POI they got in P1, it is still unclear what is so important about the religious figures, beyond the fact that they are central in the same way that like a pope would be, why these individuals need to be humanized more. So, based on the case that they have constructed and like prepped, it is probably likely that they are behind because they don't defend the full burden of the motion. Finally, two clashes. Firstly, on alignment with religion. We show you why religion is important, they don't. So we're already ahead because we protect a higher amount of people and we give them a guide and that kind of thing. This is important because the volume of people who are Christians who buy into Abrahamic religion will be always larger than the volume of individuals who say are coerced into a certain religion. So with that, for individuals on scale. Secondly, though, in terms of buying being coercive, predominantly in religious narratives, good wins over evil, so we probably have more people being happy on our side and more generally benefit. Finally, in the long term, we have ethereal positives to people by generating systems of religion that have strong levels of divinity. They perhaps mitigate people getting coerced into a religion, which is a short-term harm that most people escape from because there are checks like other religions criticizing that religion to escape from. So on scale, likelihood, and how long-term this is, we probably have better alignment with religion because we preserve the soul and magic of religion. Second, their arguments about complacency and relatedness primarily fall on, oh, it's very difficult to relate to someone who's reaching for the stars and that kind of thing. We think it would be terrible if we related heavily to Jesus and you were like struggling in life, because then you would see Jesus doing all of these amazing things and feel inadequate about yourself. Further than this, we just think it's good to have people striving in a lot of areas because it shows you that a lot is possible, but there is not pressure on you to be as good as these individuals because you are not as divine as them. We also get a scapegoat. Finally, we're probably able to counteract religion, which leaders abusing their power for gain, because divinity generates more, like more focus on divinity generates more fatigue. We protect vulnerable individuals, and we're more likely to protect individuals in religion. Only opposition preserves.
Opposition loses this debate because of rather than exclusive benefits to why their side is beneficial, they just decide that they get to get all the benefits of what religion is, and then don't show us why we don't get those benefits on their side. Note that we can get purpose on our side. Instead, you decide your purpose rather than a God giving it to you because they're seen as sacred. We think that secondly is that their case is fundamentally flawed because they contradict themselves. Their first speaker comes up here and tells you that these narratives make it so that people want protection, they want power from this stability. And then their second speaker says that it's because of their morality. Which one is it? Note, panel, that if you look at the first one, the reason why you're following those morals isn't because they're innately good, it's because you fear them. We think that that is the fundamental difference, and it disproves the entire case. They don't get this idea of morality. The only thing that they have left is this idea of power. Then lastly is that they strawman our case by saying that we want people to buy into religion. Note, we don't want that. We want people to buy into religion, but we don't want them to buy into a coercive religion that they actively fear into. This is a fundamental mischaracterization of from their point, because we still get those things like purpose and a sense of belonging. Then lastly, they just say, just follow the rules, the laws. We think that this fundamentally misses the entire point of religion, which is that idea of community, which is that idea of community, and following that moral framework. Note that that would mean that on their side, you're basically just following the laws, because you have consequences towards not following those moral aspects. Now let's go on to the main clashes of the debate, which is this idea of necessity of narratives. What we tell you on our side, two things. Number one is that people are complacent because they aren't able to relate towards this divinity and its way to distinct. And secondly is that there's unachievable goals on their side. On their side, they give you two things. Number one is that they use a unique aspect of religion, this idea of escapism. Note that we've already dealt with this. You can use fiction to escape. The fundamental difference is that you don't believe in fiction, so you aren't dependent on it, contrasted to religion, which you do believe on it. And then, secondly, is that they give you this idea of buy-in, where you can get number one meaning. Note this is outdated because we have some kind of scientific breakthrough that achieves this. Secondly, is purpose. You can get that on our side. We think that which side is more likely to get buy-in? We think it's on side opposition because people actively can choose to get into that religion. Then on the second main clash is why would followers want religion? What we get on both sides is this sense of belonging. Note, we tell you that this is impossible on their side because of the coercive aspect towards it. You aren't going to be feel a sense of belonging into a community that you actively fear being into. On their side, they give you this idea of number one, that they're powerful, that they can accept you.
Thank you everybody for that debate. The panel will now